The hum of the engine filled the compact car, a low, persistent drone against the backdrop of the city's relentless pulse. Lin Wang gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles a stark white against the worn leather. The ride-sharing app's cheerful jingle chimed intermittently, a jarring counterpoint to the knot tightening in her stomach. Another fare. Another stranger. Another story unfolding within the confines of her aging sedan. She glanced at the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of the passenger, a young woman meticulously applying lipstick. The scent of something floral, almost cloying, drifted forward. Lin Wang inhaled deeply, the familiar dusty smell of her car interior a strangely comforting anchor in the ever-shifting sea of faces and destinations. "Busy day?" the passenger asked, snapping her compact shut. Lin Wang shrugged, a slight, almost imperceptible movement. "Just driving on a whim, you know. Kills time." The lie sat heavy on her tongue, a bitter taste she'd grown accustomed to. Whim. It was a necessity, a lifeline thrown to her struggling family, a responsibility that gnawed at her with increasing ferocity each day. Her sister's strained voice echoed in her ears, a constant reminder of the bills piling up, the future hanging precariously in the balance. The passenger chuckled, a light, airy sound. "Well, you certainly have unique driving style." Lin Wang's grip tightened on the wheel. Unique? She recalled the near miss just minutes ago, the screech of tires, the horn's blare. The man crossing the street had given her a withering look, shaking his head as if she were some reckless teenager. "Your energy conservation nearly sent both of us to heaven," the passenger continued, her tone light but laced with a hint of reprimand. Lin Wang forced a smile. Energy conservation. Another lie. She wasn't conserving energy, she was battling fatigue, the bone-deep exhaustion that came with juggling 2 jobs and the weight of her family's burdens. "My apologies," she mumbled, her voice a low hum against the traffic's roar. The passenger, seemingly oblivious to Lin Wang's internal turmoil, pulled out her phone, her fingers dancing across the screen. "Don't worry," she said, her gaze fixed on the glowing display. "I gave you 5 stars. You're still the top one." Lin Wang blinked, surprise momentarily eclipsing the weariness. Top one? On the app? A strange sense of pride, absurd in its insignificance, flickered within her. A small victory in a landscape of defeats. "Thank you," she murmured, the words barely audible. A lull settled over the car, punctuated only by the rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers battling a sudden drizzle. Lin Wang stole another glance at the rearview mirror, her eyes lingering on the passenger's reflection. Something about her seemed familiar, a flicker of recognition that danced just beyond her grasp. The woman's perfectly coiffed hair, the expensive handbag resting on her lap, the faint scent of expensive perfume, it all spoke of a world far removed from Lin Wang's own. A world of corporate offices and effortless elegance, a world where whims were indulged, not born of desperation. "I heard you're resigning," the passenger said, her voice breaking the silence. Lin Wang's hand instinctively tightened on the steering wheel, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Resigning? Who?" The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. A sudden image flashed through her mind, Jangi, her sister's friend, the one who worked at that big tech company. The same Jangi who had confided in Lin Shuang about the unbearable pressure, the impossible deadlines, the constant threat of being replaced. The same Jangi who had been struggling for months, her face etched with a weariness that mirrored Lin Wang's own. "Resigning?" Lin Wang repeated, her voice barely a whisper. She tried to keep her tone neutral, casual, but the words felt thick and clumsy on her tongue. The passenger nodded, her gaze still fixed on her phone. "Jangi. From Stellar Tech. Heard she's had enough." "Jangi. The name resonated, a discordant note in the quiet hum of the car. Lin Wang's mind raced, piecing together fragments of overheard conversations, whispered anxieties, shared frustrations. Zhang Yi's forced smile, the dark circles under her eyes, the way she'd avoided Lin Xuan's gaze during their last encounter. It all pointed to a truth Lin Wang had been trying to ignore, a truth that now stared her in the face, stark and undeniable. Lin Wang swallowed, the lump in her throat growing larger. I hadn't heard, she managed, her voice tight with a sudden, inexplicable tension. She felt a wave of protectiveness wash over her, a fierce desire to shield Zhang Yi from the harsh realities of the world, even though she herself felt powerless against the same forces. The passenger shrugged, a dismissive gesture. Happens all the time in that industry. High pressure, high stakes. People burn out. She paused, her fingers still tapping on her phone. Heard Misha's getting her position. The promotion she's been gunning for. Misha. Another name, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. Lin Wang remembered Zhang Yi mentioning her, a colleague, a rival. The bitterness in Zhang Yi's voice, the barely concealed resentment. Competition, ambition, the relentless pursuit of success. It was a world Lin Wang couldn't comprehend, a world where people clawed their way to the top, leaving casualties in their wake. She thought of her sister, struggling to make ends meet, her dreams slowly eroding under the weight of responsibility. She thought of Zhang Yi, her spirit slowly being crushed by the very system that promised her a better life. A deep sense of injustice, a simmering anger, began to coil in her gut. The rest of the ride passed in a blur. Lin Wang's mind churned, replaying the conversation, dissecting each word, each nuance. The passenger's casual indifference, the almost gleeful tone when mentioning Misha's promotion, it all grated on Lin Wang's nerves. She felt a growing sense of unease, a premonition that something was deeply wrong. This wasn't just about a resignation, a promotion. It was about something more, something darker, something that resonated with the unspoken anxieties and frustrations that permeated her own life. As she pulled up to the passenger's destination, a high-rise apartment building that gleamed like a beacon of wealth and privilege, Lin Wang knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that this was just the beginning. The fluorescent lights hummed, a dull, insistent drone that mirrored the tension tightening in Zhang Yi's chest. The air in the conference room, sterile and recycled, felt heavy, thick with unspoken anxieties. Rows of faces, illuminated by the projected spreadsheet, reflected a spectrum of apprehension. Zhang Yi picked at a loose thread on her skirt, the rhythmic tug a small, private rebellion against the suffocating formality. Misha, seated 2 rows ahead, radiated an almost incandescent glow. Her perfectly coiffed hair caught the light, her smile unwavering as Mr. Zhao, the head of HR, droned on about strategic realignment and growth opportunities. Zhang Yi's stomach churned. She knew this performance. She knew this language. It was the language of corporate euphemisms, the harbinger of upheaval. She just didn't expect the upheaval to swallow her whole. Mr. Zhao cleared his throat, the amplified sound jolting Zhang Yi back to the present. As part of this restructuring, he announced, his voice smooth, betraying none of the turmoil he was about to unleash, Misha Chen will be stepping up to lead the innovation team. A ripple of murmurs, a polite smattering of applause. Misha inclined her head, the picture of graceful acceptance. Zhang Yi felt a prickle of something cold and sharp behind her ribs. Resentment? Envy? Or perhaps just the premonition of her own impending doom. Misha had always been her shadow, a constant reminder of Zhang Yi's own perceived shortcomings. Now, the shadow was eclipsing the sun. Mr. Zhao continued, his gaze sweeping across the room, lingering for a fraction of a second on Zhang Yi. That fraction of a second felt like an eternity, a silent, public execution. Furthermore, he said, the word hanging in the air like a guillotine blade, Jiang Li will be transferred to the Data Analysis Department, effective next Monday. The room held its breath. Jiang Yi's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. The blood drained from her face, leaving a chilling emptiness in its wake. Data analysis. A Siberia of the corporate world, a place where ambition went to die. This wasn't a transfer, it was a demotion, a thinly veiled punishment. Her mind raced, frantically searching for an explanation, a justification, anything to make sense of the sudden, brutal shift in her trajectory. Wei Ming. The thought of him, his smug smile, his carefully cultivated air of detached authority, sent a wave of nausea through her. This was his doing, she knew it. His subtle manipulations, his whispered insinuations, finally bearing fruit. He had promised her mentorship, guidance, a path to advancement. Instead, he had paved the way for her downfall. May I ask why I am being transferred? Her voice, even to her own ears, sounded thin, brittle, a fragile thing in the face of corporate machinery. The room shifted, the collective gaze now fixed on her, a silent audience to her impending humiliation. Mr. Zhao, his expression carefully neutral, offered a bland smile. These decisions are based on a comprehensive evaluation of individual performance and company needs, Ms. Li. The words, devoid of any real meaning, hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. But my performance reviews have been consistently excellent, Jiang Yi persisted, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. She knew she was fighting a losing battle, yet some primal instinct, some stubborn refusal to surrender, propelled her forward. A flicker of annoyance crossed Mr. Zhao's face. He glanced at his watch, a subtle yet unmistakable dismissal. This personnel adjustment will be effective next Monday, he repeated, his tone clipped, final. Dismissed. The meeting adjourned. The room emptied, leaving Jiang Yi standing alone, the fluorescent hum a mocking soundtrack to her despair. The spreadsheet, still projected on the wall, seemed to taunt her with its neat rows and columns, its illusion of order in a world that felt increasingly chaotic. She closed her eyes, willing herself to breathe, to regain some semblance of composure. The transfer wasn't just a professional setback, it was a personal affront, a betrayal of trust, a confirmation of her deepest fears. Financial pressures, already a constant source of anxiety, now loomed larger, more menacing. Her sister, Lin Shuang, relied on her, her niece, Guo, depended on her. How would she explain this? How would she manage? The weight of responsibility pressed down on her, suffocating her. She saw Lin Shuang's tired face, heard Guo's childish laughter, felt the familiar pang of guilt. She had promised them a better life, a way out of their precarious existence. Now, that promise felt like a hollow echo. She opened her eyes, the sterile brightness of the conference room a stark contrast to the darkness that had settled within her. She had to fight back. She had to find a way to reclaim what she had lost, not just for herself, but for her family. The thought of Wei Ming, his self-satisfied smirk, fueled a nascent ember of resolve. This wasn't over. It had just begun. The transfer was a catalyst, a spark igniting a fire that would consume them all. She wouldn't let him win. She wouldn't let him break her. She would rise from the ashes, stronger, more determined, and exact her revenge. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the bustling city street, gilding the chrome bumpers of passing cars. Lin Wang, a quiet observer by nature, stood patiently outside the department store, the plastic shopping bag heavy in her hand. Inside, her sister, Lin Shuang, haggled over a discounted dress for little Guo, her voice carrying out to the street in bursts of strained cheerfulness. Lin Wang shifted her weight, a familiar weariness settling in her bones. She knew the tight smile her sister wore, the one that never quite reached her eyes. It was the smile of someone constantly calculating, constantly weighing the burden of responsibility against the fleeting joy of a small indulgence. A sudden commotion broke through Lin Wang's quiet contemplation. A man, his face contorted in apparent agony, clutched his leg and collapsed dramatically onto the pavement a few feet from where she stood. A small crowd began to gather, their murmurs a mixture of concern and morbid curiosity. Lin Wang, instinctively cautious, took a step back, observing the scene unfold with a detached interest. The man, dressed in simple, slightly worn clothes, seemed ordinary, unremarkable. Yet, something about the theatricality of his fall prickled at the back of her mind. "You hit someone," a voice shrieked. An older man, his face creased with what looked like righteous indignation, pointed an accusing finger at Lin Wang. "My uncle. You hit him with your," his voice trailed off, searching for the culprit. "Your aura. You knocked him down with your careless energy." Lin Wang blinked, momentarily stunned by the absurdity of the accusation. Her aura. A flicker of amusement danced in her eyes, quickly replaced by a cool assessment of the situation. She glanced at the victim, who now lay groaning on the ground, his face pale. 10,000 win, the older man demanded. The figure hung in the air, stark against the backdrop of the bustling street. Lin Wang's mind raced, piecing together the disparate elements of the scene. The sudden fall, the exaggerated pain, the conveniently appearing nephew. It was a performance, crudely executed, but effective enough to prey on the sympathies of unsuspecting passers-by. "I didn't hit anyone," Lin Wang stated calmly, her voice unwavering despite the knot of unease tightening in her stomach. The crowd, ever fickle, began to murmur amongst themselves, their gazes shifting from the accusing man to Lin Wang and back again. 10,000 win, the man repeated, his voice dripping with false concern. "For medical expenses. My uncle is injured, can't you see?" Lin Wang's gaze remained fixed on the injured man. He was committed to his role, his groans growing louder, more theatrical. She noticed a slight twitch in his eyelid, a barely perceptible movement that betrayed the carefully crafted facade of pain. It was a small detail, easily missed, but enough to confirm her suspicions. "I think I figured it out," Lin Wang said, her voice low but firm. A strange calmness washed over her, replacing the initial shock with a quiet determination. She looked directly at the accusing man, her gaze steady and unwavering. "He targets people like you," she continued, addressing the small crowd that had gathered. "People who look like they wouldn't cause a fuss. People who would rather pay a small sum than deal with the hassle." The accusing man's face hardened. The carefully constructed mask of concern slipped, revealing a flicker of anger. The injured uncle stopped groaning abruptly, his eyes darting nervously between Lin Wang and his accomplice. "What are you talking about?" the nephew blustered, his voice rising in pitch. "My uncle is hurt. You're just trying to get out of paying." Lin Wang ignored him, turning her attention to the gathering crowd. She explained her observations, pointing out the inconsistencies in the man's fall, the exaggerated performance, and the conveniently round sum of money demanded. Her voice was clear, logical, devoid of the emotional theatrics that characterized the accusers. The crowd, initially swayed by the dramatic display, began to shift uneasily. Doubt crept into their eyes. The murmurs intensified, now laced with suspicion. The nephew, sensing the change in the atmosphere, made a move to grab Lin Wang's arm, but she stepped back, deftly avoiding his grasp. "Don't even think about it," she said, her voice edged with steel. The nephew hesitated, his hand hovering in the air. He looked around at the now hostile crowd, a flicker of fear in his eyes. The injured uncle, realizing their charade had been exposed, scrambled to his feet with surprising agility. The two men exchanged a quick glance, a silent communication passing between them. Then, without another word, they turned and disappeared into the throng of shoppers, melting away into the anonymity of the city street. Lin Wang watched them go, a strange mixture of relief and weariness washing over her. She felt the weight of the shopping bag in her hand, a tangible reminder of the responsibilities that awaited her. Her sister emerged from the department store, little Guo clutching a brightly colored dress, her face alight with childish delight. Lin Xuang's smile, though still tinged with weariness, reached her eyes this time, a genuine expression of happiness. Lin Wang returned the smile, pushing aside the lingering unease of the encounter. There were battles to be fought, burdens to be carried, but for now, this small moment of joy was enough. She knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that she would face whatever challenges lay ahead with the same quiet strength and resilience that had just seen her through this small, but significant, victory. The city, with its endless stream of human dramas, continued to flow around them, oblivious to the small battle that had just been won and lost on its busy streets. And Lin Wang, her heart heavy with the weight of unspoken worries, walked on, her steps echoing the quiet rhythm of her own enduring strength. The scent of stale cooking oil clung to the air in Lin Xuang's small apartment, a testament to the hastily fried noodles she'd prepared for dinner. Gua, her daughter, picked listlessly at the food, her small brow furrowed in a way that mirrored Lin Xuang's own anxieties. Across the table, Lin Xuang's mother sat, a picture of discontent, lips pursed and eyes darting critically around the cramped living space. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the clatter of Gua's chopsticks against the cheap melamine bowl. Lin Xuang could feel the tension coiling in her stomach, a familiar knot that tightened with each passing moment. She's going to start, she thought, the words echoing the dull ache in her temples. It's always the same. This place, her mother finally began, her voice laced with disdain, it's smaller than I remember. She waved a hand dismissively, as if swatting away the cramped confines of their reality. Lin Xuang gripped her chopsticks tighter, the plastic digging into her skin. It's what we can afford, Mom. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. Why does she do this? She thought, a wave of resentment washing over her. Every visit, the same subtle digs, the same unspoken accusations. Your brother, her mother continued, seemingly oblivious to Lin Xuang's strained tone, he's sending money again this month. Enough for a new refrigerator. His family's doing so well. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. The knot in Lin Xuang's stomach tightened further. He always sends money. The thought felt like a bitter pill. And she always makes sure I know. Mom, I'm tied on money, she said, forcing the words out, each syllable a struggle against the rising tide of frustration. I've told you, was school fees, the rent of everything's gone up. Her mother's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something cold and sharp glinting in their depths. Tied on money. And yet you can afford that new phone. She gestured towards the device lying on the table, a small, worn smartphone that Lin Xuang had scrimped and saved for months to buy. It was her lifeline to work, to Jiangyi, to the world outside this suffocating apartment. A wave of heat rushed to Lin Xuang's face. I need it for work, Mom. How am I supposed to? She stopped abruptly, the futility of explaining washing over her. She won't understand, she thought, a weary resignation settling in her bones. She never understands. Your brother, her mother interrupted, her voice rising now, sharp and accusatory, he understands family. He takes care of his responsibilities. How have I been ignoring the family? Lin Xuang retorted, her voice cracking with the strain. The question echoed in the small room, bouncing off the bare walls. I'm the one here, struggling, sacrificing, she thought, the resentment burning hot in her chest. He sends money, a convenient substitute for presents, for actual support. You're always so busy, her mother continued, ignoring her question entirely. Never time for a call, never a visit. Always with your work, your own life. Lin Xuang clenched her fists under the table, her knuckles white. The injustice of it all pressed down on her, suffocating her. She doesn't see the hours I work, she thought, the anger bubbling over. She doesn't see the sacrifices I make, the constant worry, the endless struggle to make ends meet. What's the use of supporting you? The words slipped out, raw and ragged, before Lin Xuang could stop them. The silence that followed was thick and heavy, charged with unspoken accusations and years of accumulated resentment. Gua, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, started to cry, her small sobs adding another layer of tension to the already fraught scene. Lin Xuang looked at her daughter, at the fear in her wide, innocent eyes, and a pang of guilt pierced through her anger. This isn't right, she thought, a wave of exhaustion washing over her. This isn't how it should be. Her mother, however, seemed unfazed by Gua's distress. She simply continued to stare at Lin Xuang, her gaze cold and unwavering. Ungrateful, she muttered under her breath, the word a sharp, pointed barb aimed directly at Lin Xuang's heart. The weight of it all pressed down on Lin Xuang, the financial struggles, the strained relationship with her mother, the constant comparison to her seemingly perfect brother. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to gather her composure, to find some semblance of peace amidst the chaos. I'm tired, she thought, the words a quiet whisper in the storm of her emotions. So tired. Opening her eyes, she looked at her mother, at the lines etched deep into her face, at the stubborn set of her jaw. And in that moment, a flicker of understanding, of empathy, sparked within her. She's scared too, Lin Xuang realized, the thought a sudden, unexpected revelation. Scared of being alone, of being a burden. But the understanding, fleeting and fragile, was quickly overshadowed by the years of resentment, by the weight of unspoken words and unacknowledged sacrifices. The silence stretched on, a chasm widening between mother and daughter, filled with the unspoken grievances of a lifetime. The scent of stale oil hung heavy in the air, a suffocating reminder of the cramped reality of their lives, of the distance that stretched between them, a distance that seemed impossible to bridge. The noodles on Gua's plate remained untouched, growing cold, a silent testament to the bitter taste of their unspoken truths. The flickering fluorescent light of Zhangyi's small apartment cast long, distorted shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Outside, the city hummed with a restless energy, a stark contrast to the oppressive quiet within. Zhangyi sat at the chipped formica kitchen table, the lukewarm tea in front of her untouched. Each tick of the cheap wall clock felt like a hammer blow against her skull, a relentless reminder of the mounting pressure squeezing the air from her lungs. The transfer to the Shenzhen branch loomed like a guillotine, a swift, decisive end to her career at Huaxing Technologies. Wei Ming's smug face, his thinly veiled threats, replayed in her mind, a venomous loop of humiliation. He held all the cards, all the power. And she, despite her talent, her dedication, was nothing more than a pawn in his game. The click of the lock startled her. Lin Xuang shuffled in, her shoulders slumped, her face etched with a weariness that went beyond the usual fatigue of a mother juggling work and family. Gua, trailing behind her, clung to her mother's leg like a limpet, her usually bright eyes dull and shadowed. Zhangyi felt a prickle of unease. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Xuang, what is it? Zhangyi asked, her voice barely a whisper. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Lin Xuang avoided her gaze, her fingers nervously twisting the strap of her worn handbag. Jangi's stomach churned. This silence was a prelude to a storm. Finally, Lin Xuang spoke, her voice cracking, "Jangi, I need to tell you something." Each word seemed to be dragged from her throat, coated in a thick layer of shame. Jangi watched her sister, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. What fresh hell awaited her now? Her own problems felt insignificant, dwarfed by the fear that radiated from Lin Xuang's hunched figure. Mom was pressing me about the rent, the utilities." Lin Xuang's voice trailed off, her eyes welling with tears. Jangi's breath hitched. The rent. The utilities. Money she had painstakingly saved, money meant to provide a fragile safety net for her family, for Gua's future. Where did that 25,000 come from? Jangi asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of dread and disbelief. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken accusations. Lin Xuang's face crumpled. I used the money temporarily, it's over, I honestly didn't know." Her words tumbled out in a torrent of choked sobs, a desperate plea for understanding. Jangi's mind reeled. 25,000 yuan. Gone. Just like that. A wave of nausea washed over her, the fluorescent light above blurring into a dizzying halo. It wasn't just the money. It was the betrayal. The shattering of the fragile trust that held their family together. She stared at Lin Xuang, her sister's face a mask of despair, and felt a strange detachment, a numbness creeping through her veins. How could this happen? How could her own sister, the person she trusted most in the world, do this to her? To their family? To Gua? The image of Gua's small, trusting face flashed through her mind, a stark reminder of the consequences of Lin Xuang's actions. Gua, who deserved so much more than this constant struggle, this precarious existence. Jangi closed her eyes, trying to block out the rising tide of anger, the bitter taste of disappointment. What was she supposed to do now? The weight of her own problems, the impending transfer, Wei Ming's insidious machinations, all seemed to fade into the background, overshadowed by this new, crushing reality. She looked around the small, cramped apartment, the peeling paint, the worn furniture, the symbols of their shared struggle, and felt a wave of despair wash over her. Lin Xuang's sobs echoed in the small space, each gasp a fresh wound. Jangi wanted to scream, to rage, to lash out. But what good would it do? It wouldn't bring back the money. It wouldn't erase the fear in Gua's eyes. It wouldn't mend the fractured foundation of their family. She looked at Gua, her niece, clinging to her mother's leg, her small body trembling. And in that moment, the anger, the resentment, began to recede, replaced by a profound weariness, a deep, bone-aching fatigue. She had to be strong. For Gua. For her family. Even if it meant carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Even if it meant facing the darkness alone. Jangi reached out, her hand trembling slightly, and gently stroked Gua's hair. The child looked up at her, her eyes wide and questioning. Jangi forced a smile, a pale imitation of reassurance, but it was enough. Gua snuggled closer to her mother, her small hand reaching out to grasp Jangi's fingers. A tiny, fragile connection in a world that felt like it was constantly on the verge of collapse. The fluorescent light flickered again, casting long, dancing shadows across the room. Jangi looked at her sister, her face streaked with tears, her body racked with sobs. And in that moment, Jangi knew. She was alone. Utterly and completely alone. But she would fight. She would fight for Gua, for her family, for herself. She had to. There was no other choice. The city outside roared with indifferent life, oblivious to the quiet tragedy unfolding within the confines of Jangi's small, crumbling apartment. The night stretched ahead, long and dark, but somewhere within the depths of Jangi's weary heart, a tiny ember of hope still flickered. She would find a way. She always did. The neon glow of the city bled through the rain-streaked windows, casting long, distorted shadows across the plush, dimly lit bar. Jangi clutched her purse, the leather cold and slick against her damp palms. The air hung thick with the scent of expensive whiskey and unspoken tensions. She hadn't touched her drink, the ice melting into a watery pool, a miniature reflection of her own dissolving composure. Across from her, Wei Ming swirled the amber liquid in his glass, the motion deliberate, almost theatrical. His eyes, sharp and calculating, held a glimmer of amusement, as if he were enjoying a private joke she wasn't privy to. He's savoring this, she thought, a bitter taste rising in her throat. He knows I'm on edge. You wanted to see me? Jangi asked, her voice tighter than she intended. Each word felt like a pebble scraping against raw skin. She forced herself to meet his gaze, refusing to let him see the tremor of anxiety that ran through her. Don't give him the satisfaction. Wei Ming took a slow sip of his whiskey, the silence stretching, thick and suffocating. He set the glass down, the clink against the polished wood echoing in the quiet space. The transfer, he finally said, his voice smooth, devoid of any inflection. I understand you have concerns. Concerns? The word felt like a cruel understatement. Her entire life had been thrown into disarray. The transfer to the Chengdu branch felt less like a career move and more like an exile, a calculated move to sever her ties, to erase her from the equation. Is this his way of punishing me, she wondered, a knot tightening in her stomach. Concerns doesn't even begin to cover it, she retorted, her voice laced with a controlled anger. Why couldn't you give me a heads up? A simple courtesy, considering, her voice trailed off, the unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. Considering what we had. Wei Ming's lips curved into a thin smile, the expression not quite reaching his eyes. Courtesy, he echoed, the word laced with irony. In this business, Jangi, sentimentality is a liability. He leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxed, almost insolent. He's enjoying this too much, she thought, the anger simmering just below the surface. He's playing with me like a cat with a mouse. My performance reviews have been stellar, Jangi countered, fighting to keep her voice steady. There's no logical reason for this transfer. Unless, the realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Unless it's personal. Unless this is about us. Wei Ming's gaze intensified, a flicker of something annoyance. Guilt? Crossing his face. He sighed, a theatrical display of weariness. Your performance wasn't ideal, Jangi. Let's not pretend otherwise. You've become distracted. Distracted. The word hung in the air, a thinly veiled accusation. Jangi's mind raced, replaying every interaction, every stolen glance, every whispered conversation. Had she been so transparent? Had her feelings for him, feelings she had so desperately tried to suppress, been so obvious? He used me, she realized, a cold wave of understanding washing over her. He used my feelings to manipulate me, to control me. I've already promoted Misha, Wei Ming continued, his voice calm, almost soothing. She's taking over your current responsibilities. Jangi stared at him, speechless. Misha. Her colleague, her friend. The irony was almost unbearable. He replaced me, she thought, the realization a sharp, stinging pain. He replaced me with someone else. But, Wei Ming added, his voice laced with a hint of condescension, you're still working under me. In Chengdu. A lateral move. Think of it as a fresh start. Jangi's breath caught in her throat. A fresh start. He made it sound so simple, so benign. As if uprooting her life, severing her ties, and exiling her to another city was a simple matter of starting anew. He's lying, she thought, her mind screaming. He's lying through his teeth. The person who's resigning now is Chai, Wei Ming said, as if reading her thoughts. He watched her closely, gauging her reaction. Chai. The senior manager in Chengdu, known for his ruthless efficiency and cutthroat tactics. Working under him would be a living hell. He set me up, Jiang Yi realized, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place with sickening clarity. He set me up to fail. Why? She whispered, her voice barely audible. The question wasn't just about the transfer, it was about everything. About their clandestine meetings, their stolen moments, the promises he had whispered in the dark. Why did you do this to me? Wei Ming shrugged, a casual dismissal that felt like a slap in the face. Chai's position needed filling. You were available. He paused, his eyes boring into hers. Besides, Jiang Yi, let's be honest. This arrangement wasn't working. It was becoming complicated. Arrangement. The word hung in the air, cold and clinical, stripping away any pretense of affection, of connection. It was a business transaction, nothing more. And she, Jiang Yi realized with a sickening lurch, had been nothing but a pawn in his game. A strange calm settled over her, a chilling stillness in the eye of the storm. The anger, the confusion, the hurt, it all seemed to recede, leaving behind a hollow emptiness. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw him for who he truly was, a manipulator, a liar, a man who used people and discarded them without a second thought. I understand, she said, her voice quiet, steady. The words felt foreign on her tongue, yet they held a strange power. I understand who you are. Wei Ming's smile faltered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. He opened his mouth to speak, but Jiang Yi cut him off. Don't, she said, her voice laced with a newfound steel. Don't insult me with any more of your lies. She stood up, the movement smooth and deliberate. This arrangement is over. She turned and walked away, the click of her heels against the polished floor a sharp, decisive sound. The neon lights of the city blurred through the rain-streaked windows, no longer distorted, but clear, sharp, and unforgiving. She didn't look back. It's over, she repeated to herself, the words a mantra, a promise. It's finally over. The fluorescent lights hummed, a dull counterpoint to the rhythmic tapping of keyboards. Jiang Yi felt the sterile air conditioning prickling her skin, a stark contrast to the simmering unease within her. She'd known this conversation was inevitable, ever since the transfer notice landed on her desk like a poisoned dart. Wei Ming's office loomed at the end of the corridor, its glass walls a deceptive facade of transparency. Each step she took felt heavier than the last, her stomach tightening with a knot of dread. He'd summoned her, and she knew, with chilling certainty, it wasn't to offer an olive branch. Lin Wang, stationed near the elevators as always, caught her eye. A flicker of understanding, a subtle nod, passed between them. He held the door open for her, a small act of courtesy that felt like a lifeline in the suffocating atmosphere. Everything okay, Miss Jiang Yi? He asked, his voice soft but steady. Jiang Yi managed a weak smile. Just a meeting, she replied, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. He knows. He sees it all. The thought echoed in her mind. Lin Wang's quiet observations, his uncanny ability to decipher the undercurrents of the office dynamics, unnerved and comforted her in equal measure. He was a silent witness to the power plays, the betrayals, the quiet desperation that permeated the air. Wei Ming's office was predictably immaculate, a testament to his meticulous control. He sat behind his expansive desk, a predatory stillness in his posture. He gestured dismissively towards the chair opposite him. "Have a seat, Jangi." His voice was smooth, laced with a false cordiality that grated on her nerves. He enjoys this, she thought, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. He revels in the power he wields. "I received the transfer notice," Jangi said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the turmoil inside. Wei Ming leaned back, his gaze sharp and assessing. "Indeed. A necessary restructuring, as I'm sure you understand." His words were empty, devoid of genuine explanation. "Restructuring," Jangi repeated, the word dripping with irony. "Or retaliation?" The question hung in the air, a challenge she hadn't intended to voice, but couldn't suppress. A flicker of anger crossed Wei Ming's face, quickly masked by a condescending smile. "You've truly lost it, Jangi. Accusing your superior of," he trailed off, shaking his head. "Of what?" Jangi pressed, the fear giving way to a surge of reckless defiance. "Of using his position to punish those who don't comply." Wei Ming's smile vanished. He rose from his chair, his towering figure casting a shadow over her. "I don't want it to be over, Jangi," he hissed, his voice low and menacing. "You have potential. But you're making this very difficult." "It's over," Jangi retorted, her voice trembling but resolute. The illusion of professional courtesy shattered, leaving only raw animosity. "It's over." Wei Ming laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You think you can just walk away? You have no idea the kind of influence I wield. I have thousands of ways to kick you out of this industry. You'll be begging for your old job back." Jangi stared at him, a cold dread spreading through her veins. His threats weren't empty. He had the power to destroy her career, to crush her aspirations. She'd underestimated his ruthlessness, his willingness to use his influence to punish those who dared to defy him. She'd seen glimpses of it before, in the hushed whispers of colleagues, in the fear that lurked beneath the surface of their forced smiles. But she'd never truly grasped the extent of his malice until now. As Jangi left Wei Ming's office, her legs felt weak, her mind reeling from the confrontation. Lin Wang was still there, his presence a strange comfort amidst the turmoil. He didn't speak, but his eyes held a depth of understanding that transcended words. He simply offered her a slight incline of his head, a silent acknowledgement of the battle she'd just fought. Later that day, Jangi found Lin Wang by the company's loading dock, taking a break. He was meticulously cleaning his car, the rhythmic wiping of the windshield a stark contrast to the chaos within her. He looked up as she approached, his gaze steady and calm. "Miss Jangi," he greeted her, his voice a soothing balm to her frayed nerves. "Something on your mind?" Jangi hesitated, then poured out her frustrations, the fear, the anger, the crushing weight of Wei Ming's threats. Lin Wang listened patiently, his silence a comforting presence. He didn't offer platitudes or empty reassurances. He simply listened, absorbing her words, her pain. When she finished, he nodded slowly. "Some people," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "build their empires on the backs of others. They thrive on control, on fear. But their foundations are weak. They crumble eventually." His words, simple yet profound, resonated deep within her. He wasn't offering a solution, not a magical fix to her predicament. He was offering something far more valuable, a sense of perspective, a reminder that even the most powerful figures are not invincible. As Jangi walked away, the weight on her chest had eased, replaced by a flicker of hope. Lin Wang's words had planted a seed of resilience within her, a quiet defiance against the forces that sought to crush her. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew she wasn't alone. In the quiet observation of a driver, she found an unexpected ally, a silent testament to the enduring power of human connection in the face of adversity. The chipped paint on the doorframe seemed to mock Lin Shuang's weary gaze. Each imperfection, each flaking shard, mirrored the slow disintegration of her carefully constructed life. She leaned against it, the rough wood pressing into her back, a dull ache resonating with the deeper ache within her chest. Gua, her daughter, was humming a tuneless melody in the other room, the childish innocence grating against the raw edges of Lin Shuang's anxieties. Zhangyi's arrival had been unexpected, unsettling. She hadn't seen her sister in months, not since the whispers about the trouble at Zhangyi's company began to circulate within the family. Lin Shuang had tried to ignore them, to bury her head in the sand of daily struggles, but the whispers had grown into a storm, and now, here was Zhangyi, standing in her living room, a storm cloud personified. So, Lin Shuang finally said, her voice tight, brittle. "What brings you here?" The question hung in the air, thick with unspoken accusations. She knew. She'd known the moment she saw the haunted look in Zhangyi's eyes. It was the same look she saw in her own reflection every morning. The look of someone drowning in desperation. Zhangyi shifted uncomfortably, her gaze darting around the small, cluttered apartment. "Just visiting," she mumbled, the words sounding hollow even to her own ears. She saw the disbelief in Lin Shuang's eyes, the tightly pressed lips, the way her fingers gripped the edge of the worn sofa. "She knows," Zhangyi thought, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. "She knows I'm in trouble." "Visiting?" Lin Shuang repeated, her voice laced with sarcasm. "You haven't visited in months, Zhangyi. Not since everything happened." She paused, the unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. "Not since you got entangled with that Wei Ming. Not since you started chasing after things you couldn't afford." Zhangyi flinched. Lin Shuang's words were like needles, pricking at her carefully constructed facade. She'd hoped to maintain some semblance of control, to pretend that she wasn't falling apart, but her sister saw through her, just as she always had. "I knew it," Zhangyi said, a bitter taste rising in her throat. "You came to gloat over my misfortune." The accusation was a defense mechanism, a shield against the vulnerability that threatened to engulf her. Lin Shuang's eyes softened, a flicker of concern replacing the anger. "Gloat," she echoed, the word sounding foreign on her tongue. She crossed the room, the worn floorboards creaking beneath her weight, and sat beside Zhangyi on the sofa. Gua, oblivious to the tension, continued her humming, the melody now taking on a mournful tone. "I came because I'm worried about you, Zhangyi. Mother's worried too." Zhangyi looked away, her gaze fixed on a faded patch on the wall. She didn't want to see the pity in her sister's eyes, the reflection of her own failure. "There's nothing to worry about," she said, the words barely a whisper. "Don't lie to me," Lin Shuang said, her voice gentle but firm. "I know about the transfer. I know about Wei Ming." Zhangyi closed her eyes, the name a curse on her lips. Wei Ming. The architect of her downfall. The man who had promised her the world and then snatched it away, leaving her with nothing but ashes. "It's not his fault," she said, the lie tasting like poison. "Then whose fault is it, Zhangyi?" Lin Shuang's voice was sharp, cutting through the layers of denial. "It's not for the money," Zhangyi retorted, the words escaping before she could stop them. The admission hung in the air, raw and exposed. It wasn't about the money. It was about the humiliation, the betrayal, the feeling of being used and discarded. It was about reclaiming her dignity, about proving to Wei Ming, and to herself, that she wasn't as weak as he thought. Lin Shuang sighed, a long, weary sound. "What's so great about Wei Ming?" she asked, her voice tinged with bewilderment. "He's just a man. A flawed, ambitious man who doesn't care about anyone but himself. Jiang Yi opened her mouth to argue, to defend the illusion she'd built around Wei Ming, but the words wouldn't come. Lin Xuang was right. She knew it deep down, but admitting it meant confronting the painful truth of her own naivete. I want to help you, Jiang Yi, Lin Xuang said, her hand resting on Jiang Yi's arm, a gesture of comfort and solidarity. We can figure this out together. A flicker of hope ignited within Jiang Yi, a tiny ember in the vast darkness. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone. Maybe there was a way out of this mess. A plan began to form in her mind, hazy at first, then gradually taking shape, fueled by her sister's support and her own burning desire for revenge. She looked at Lin Xuang, a new resolve hardening her gaze. I have an idea, she began, the words pregnant with unspoken possibilities. The hum of Gua's childish melody seemed to shift, taking on a more hopeful tone, as if echoing the nascent plan taking root in Jiang Yi's mind. The chipped paint on the doorframe still mocked them, but its silent condemnation seemed less potent now, overshadowed by the fragile promise of a shared struggle, a sisterhood forged in the crucible of hardship. The aroma of burnt garlic clung to the air, a testament to Lin Xuang's latest culinary mishap. Gua, her daughter, wrinkled her nose, a tiny hand instinctively reaching for the worn teddy bear clutched to her chest. Grandma Gu misses you, she mumbled, her voice barely audible above the clatter of pots and pans. Lin Xuang sighed, a familiar tightness gripping her chest. Grandma Gu. Another reminder of the life she'd left behind, a life of simple comforts and unconditional love. Here, in this cramped apartment, love felt like a luxury she could barely afford. I know, sweetheart, she replied, forcing a smile. We'll visit her soon, I promise. A promise she wasn't sure she could keep. The weight of unpaid bills pressed down on her, heavy as the wok in her hand. Later that evening, a knock echoed through the apartment. Lin Xuang, her face etched with exhaustion, opened the door to reveal a woman she hadn't seen in years. Mei Lin. The scent of expensive perfume wafted in, a stark contrast to the lingering aroma of burnt garlic. Xuang. It's been ages. Mei Lin exclaimed, her voice bright and cheerful, a melody jarring against the somber backdrop of Lin Xuang's anxieties. Lin Xuang managed a weak smile, a wave of conflicting emotions washing over her. Relief at seeing a familiar face, apprehension at the memories Mei Lin's presence evoked, and a flicker of resentment at the effortless elegance Mei Lin exuded, a world away from Lin Xuang's struggles. Come in, Lin Xuang offered, stepping aside. As Mei Lin entered, Gua peeked out from behind her mother's legs, her eyes wide with curiosity. What's that smell? Gua asked, her nose wrinkling again, oblivious to the social niceties her mother was desperately trying to uphold. Mei Lin laughed, a light, tinkling sound that grated on Lin Xuang's nerves. Something delicious, I'm sure, she replied, her gaze sweeping over the modest apartment, taking in the chipped paint and the threadbare rug. Lin Xuang felt a prickle of shame, a familiar sting of inadequacy. She busied herself with pouring tea, her hands trembling slightly. So, Mei Lin began, settling onto the worn sofa, how are things? How's Wei Ming? The casual mention of his name hung in the air, thick with unspoken tension. Lin Xuang stiffened, her grip tightening on the teapot. How to explain the tangled web of resentment, guilt, and a lingering, unwanted attraction that bound her sister to that man? He's fine, she replied, her voice strained. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. She avoided Mei Lin's probing gaze, focusing on the steam rising from the teacups. You know, Mei Lin continued, a wistful look on her face, he was quite the charmer back in the day. We had a thing, briefly. The revelation hit Lin Xuang like a physical blow. She had suspected, had seen the lingering glances, the subtle shifts in Wei Ming's demeanor whenever Mei Lin's name was mentioned. But hearing it confirmed, seeing the nostalgic gleam in Mei Lin's eyes, ignited a fire in her gut. A burning mix of anger and jealousy. She pushed the thought away, disgusted with herself. What right did she have to feel jealous? Later, after Mei Lin had left, the scent of her perfume still lingering in the air like a phantom limb, Gua climbed onto her mother's lap, her small hand tracing the lines on Lin Shuang's palm. "How did you know Mom was like before she became my mom?" she asked, her voice soft and curious. Lin Shuang looked at her daughter, her heart aching with a love so fierce it threatened to consume her. How to explain the complexities of life, the choices made, the paths not taken, to a child so innocent, so untouched by the world's harsh realities? She was different, Lin Shuang began, her voice barely a whisper. She laughed more. She dreamed bigger. She wasn't always so tired. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken regrets. Gua tilted her head, her brow furrowed in thought. "Like Grandma Gu?" she asked. Lin Shuang nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. Yes, like Grandma Gu. A life of simple joys, a life she feared was now beyond her reach. The apartment felt smaller now, the silence punctuated by the ticking of the old clock on the wall, each tick a reminder of the passing time, of opportunities lost, of dreams deferred. Lin Shuang closed her eyes, the image of Mei Lin's carefree laughter echoing in her mind. She thought of Jiangyi, her sister, battling her own demons, caught in a web of ambition and manipulation. She thought of Wei Ming, the architect of their misery, his power a suffocating presence in their lives. A wave of helplessness washed over her. What could she do, a single mother, struggling to make ends meet, against such a formidable force? But then, she thought of Gua, her daughter, her reason for existing, and a flicker of determination ignited within her. She wouldn't let them be crushed. She would find a way, somehow, to protect her family, to reclaim the life that had been stolen from them. The scent of burnt garlic might linger in the air, but beneath it, a new scent was emerging, faint but persistent, the scent of hope. The air in Lin Shuang's apartment hung thick and heavy, a mixture of the lingering scent of cheap instant noodles and the faint, metallic tang of unshed tears. The flickering fluorescent light cast long, distorted shadows across the cramped living room, highlighting the worn patches on the sofa and the chipped paint on the walls. Gua, nestled amongst a pile of well-loved stuffed animals, snored softly, her small chest rising and falling rhythmically. Lin Shuang watched her daughter, a knot tightening in her stomach. Each shallow breath felt like a tiny hammer blow against the fortress of her resolve. Just a little longer, she whispered to herself, just a little longer and things will get better. The promise felt hollow, a fragile echo in the vast emptiness of her worries. The click of the lock startled her. Her hand instinctively flew to her chest, her heart a trapped bird fluttering against her ribs. Jiangyi stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the dim light of the hallway. Her face was etched with a weariness that mirrored Lin Shuang's own, yet something else flickered in her eyes, a hesitant hope, perhaps. "Sis, you're back." Lin Shuang's voice was barely a whisper, raspy with exhaustion. Seeing Jiangyi here, in her small, cluttered apartment, a wave of conflicting emotions washed over her. Relief warred with resentment, concern battled with the bitter taste of old hurts. Jiangyi stepped inside, her gaze sweeping over the room, taking in the scattered toys, the unwashed dishes piled in the sink, the general air of disarray. Her heart ached with a familiar pang of guilt. This is what my choices have wrought, she thought, the weight of her responsibilities pressing down on her like a physical burden. She had promised herself she would make things better for her family, but the weight of her own struggles threatened to drag them all down. "Did you make all this?" Lin Shuang gestured towards a plastic container on the small, wobbly table, her eyes widening slightly. The aroma of steamed dumplings, fragrant and savory, filled the air, a stark contrast to the usual blandness of their meals. Jangi managed a small smile, a fragile thing that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thought you might be tired of noodles." The words felt heavy, laden with unspoken apologies and the unspoken plea for understanding. Lin Xuang's gaze lingered on her sister's face, searching for something, some clue to the turmoil she knew Jangi carried within her. Did you run out of money?" The question hung in the air, heavy with the unspoken fears that haunted both of them. Lin Xuang knew the precariousness of Jangi's situation, the constant threat of financial ruin that loomed over them both. She hated the vulnerability in her voice, the desperation she couldn't quite mask. Jangi hesitated, her gaze dropping to the worn linoleum floor. Shame, hot and prickly, crawled up her neck. She wanted to lie, to fabricate some story about a sudden windfall, a bonus from work. But the lie felt like a betrayal, another brick in the wall that had slowly been building between them. "No," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, I borrowed some." The lie, even this small one, tasted like ash in her mouth. Lin Xuang studied her sister's face, her eyes narrowed. She knew Jangi well enough to recognize the subtle shift in her posture, the flicker of evasion in her eyes. She's lying, she thought, a cold knot forming in her stomach. But why? The question gnawed at her, a persistent itch beneath the surface of her relief at seeing her sister. A long silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words and the weight of shared history. The only sound was Gua's soft breathing, a gentle counterpoint to the tension that crackled in the air. Lin Xuang sank onto the sofa, the worn springs groaning beneath her weight. She gestured to the dumplings. "Eat," she said, her voice softer now, the sharp edge of suspicion blunted by a wave of exhaustion. "We'll talk later." Jangi nodded, her throat tight with unshed tears. She picked up a dumpling, the warmth of the dough comforting against her cold fingers. As she ate, she watched her sister, the lines of worry etched deep into her face, the exhaustion evident in the slump of her shoulders. Guilt twisted in her gut, a sharp, insistent pain. "I need to tell her," she thought, the words forming a silent mantra in her mind. "I need to tell her everything." But the fear held her back, a paralyzing grip that squeezed the air from her lungs. The truth, she knew, would shatter the fragile peace they had managed to create, and she wasn't sure if either of them could withstand the fallout. The shared meal was a silent communion, a fragile truce in the midst of their unspoken anxieties. The aroma of the dumplings, the warmth of the food, offered a momentary respite from the cold reality of their lives. But beneath the surface, the currents of doubt and suspicion continued to swirl, a silent undertow threatening to pull them under. The reconciliation, Jangi knew, was only the beginning. The real battle, the battle for trust and forgiveness, was yet to come. The air in Wei Ming's meticulously decorated living room hung thick with the unspoken. He stood by the expansive window overlooking the city, a cityscape that mirrored the fractured landscape of his own life. The muted gray tones of the approaching twilight seemed to seep into the room, staining the expensive furniture with a melancholic hue. He could feel the tension radiating from the woman seated on the plush sofa, his wife, Mei Lin. Her silence was more damning than any accusation. He hadn't realized how much he'd relied on her vibrant chatter, her easy laughter, to fill the void within him. Now, the silence echoed the emptiness in his soul. She knows, he thought, his gut twisting with a familiar anxiety. She knows everything. He took a slow, deliberate sip of the lukewarm tea, the taste bitter on his tongue. It tasted like regret. Mei Lin watched him, her eyes reflecting the city lights, glittering with an unfamiliar hardness. He had always admired her strength, her quiet resilience, but now it felt like a weapon pointed directly at him. Years of shared meals, whispered secrets, and intertwined dreams now seemed like a fragile illusion, shattered by his own reckless ambition. The silence stretched, each tick of the clock a hammer blow against the crumbling facade of their marriage. She picked up a delicately crafted porcelain teacup, its intricate design a stark contrast to the raw emotions swirling within her. He thinks this display of power, this silence, will intimidate me, she thought, her grip tightening on the cup. He's wrong. I've been silent for too long. A sharp rap at the door broke the strained silence. Wei Ming turned, relief washing over him, however fleeting. The lawyer, Mr. Zhao, entered, his presence a stark reminder of the legal battle that lay ahead. He carried a briefcase, its metallic clasp clicking shut with the finality of a judge's gavel. Wei Ming straightened his tie, a nervous gesture he hadn't realized he'd adopted. It's just a formality, he told himself, but the words felt hollow even to his own ears. A necessary step to what? Freedom? Or just a different kind of prison? Mr. Zhao's gaze swept across the room, taking in the strained atmosphere, the expensive furnishings, the two people locked in their silent battle. He had seen this scenario play out countless times, the unraveling of lives woven together, now torn apart by infidelity and betrayal. He placed his briefcase on the glass coffee table, the sound echoing in the quiet room like a gunshot. "Shall we begin?" he asked, his voice neutral, professional. Mei Lin set the teacup down, the delicate porcelain clicking softly against the glass table. The sound, though small, cut through the tension. "Yes," she said, her voice steady, surprisingly strong. "Let's begin." She looked directly at Wei Ming, her gaze unwavering. "Before we delve into the legal details, I have something to say." Wei Ming shifted uncomfortably, a muscle twitching in his jaw. He knew what was coming. The confrontation he had been dreading, the truth he had tried to bury beneath layers of denial, was about to surface. He braced himself. "My wife doesn't answer my calls," he'd said to Zhang Yi just days ago, dismissing Mei Lin's absence with a casual shrug. The memory now burned in his mind, a testament to his arrogance, his blindness. He'd been so focused on climbing the corporate ladder, on securing his position, that he'd failed to see the cracks appearing in the foundation of his own life. "You'll see her on the day of the court hearing," he'd added, his voice laced with a dismissive tone. He had underestimated Mei Lin. He'd underestimated her strength, her resolve. He'd seen her as a quiet, supportive wife, content to live in the shadow of his success. He'd been wrong. "All you want is my money," he muttered now, the words barely audible, a desperate attempt to deflect the blame, to justify his actions. He knew it was a lie. Mei Lin had never cared about his money. She had cared about him, about their life together. And he had thrown it all away. Mei Lin's voice, though quiet, resonated with power. "Half belongs to me, Wei Ming. But that's not what I want." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. He looked at her, searching her face for a flicker of the woman he once knew, the woman he had loved. But all he saw was a stranger, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resolve he couldn't decipher. "What you've taken from me," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "is more than just money. You've taken our years, our memories, our future." Her voice cracked slightly, but she quickly regained her composure. "And no court, no lawyer, can give that back." Wei Ming's carefully constructed world began to crumble around him. The expensive apartment, the city view, the carefully curated image of success, it all felt meaningless. He had achieved everything he thought he wanted, but in the process, he had lost everything that truly mattered. He opened his mouth to speak, to apologize, to explain, but the words caught in his throat. What could he say? What words could possibly bridge the chasm that had opened between them? Mr. Zhao cleared his throat, his voice a jarring intrusion into the raw emotion of the moment. Perhaps we should review the settlement terms, he suggested, his tone professional, detached. He opened his briefcase, the click of the latches echoing the finality of Wei Ming's choices. The city lights outside the window twinkled, indifferent to the human drama unfolding within. The twilight deepened, casting long shadows across the room, symbolic of the long shadow his actions would cast over his life. He looked at Mei Lin, her face illuminated by the city's glow, and for the first time, he saw the full extent of the damage he had caused. The silence returned, heavier now, filled with the unspoken weight of regret. The fluorescent lights of the office hummed, a monotonous drone that echoed the dull ache in Zhangyi's temples. The air, conditioned to a sterile chill, carried a faint metallic tang, the scent of over-sanitized surfaces and brewing ambition. Zhangyi sipped her lukewarm tea, the bitter taste clinging to her tongue like the remnants of a sleepless night. Her eyes, shadowed with fatigue, scanned the hushed activity around her, a hive of forced normalcy buzzing over an undercurrent of unease. Yesterday's vibrant energy had been replaced by a palpable tension, a thin film of ice cracking beneath every forced smile and hushed conversation. She'd known something was brewing. The hushed phone calls Wei Ming had been taking, the furtive glances cast in her direction, the almost palpable shift in his demeanor from charming condescension to a strained politeness that felt more like a warning. Now, the whispers slithering through the office corridors confirmed her suspicions. Funei. The project, Wei Ming's supposed masterpiece, the one he'd dangled before her like a poisoned carrot. It had imploded. Spectacularly. Zhangyi watched as Misha, her newly promoted colleague, glided past, her heels clicking against the polished floor, a smug satisfaction barely concealed beneath a veil of professional concern. A pang of resentment, sharp and familiar, twisted in Zhangyi's gut. Misha, with her effortless charm and unwavering confidence, the golden child, always basking in Wei Ming's favor. Had she known? Had she been complicit? Zhangyi pushed the thought away, telling herself it didn't matter. Misha's success was simply another reminder of her own stagnation, another weight dragging her down. Funei has really messed up this time, the voice, hushed but laced with malicious glee, drifted from a nearby cubicle. Zhangyi's fingers tightened around her teacup. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. The gossipmongers, always eager to feast on the misfortune of others, their whispers like vultures circling a dying carcass. How dare he make such a major decision on his own? Someone has to be responsible. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Zhangyi's heart hammered against her ribs. Responsible. The word echoed in her mind, a dark promise. Wei Ming's recklessness, his arrogance, it had finally caught up with him. A flicker of something cold and hard, something she hadn't recognized in herself before, sparked within her. Was it satisfaction? Or something darker, a nascent desire for retribution? She closed her eyes, picturing Wei Ming's face, the carefully constructed mask of composure he always wore. She imagined it crumbling, the smooth surface cracking under the weight of his failures. The image brought a strange sense of calm, a chilling sense of anticipation. This was it. The turning point. She could almost taste the bitterness of his defeat, and for a fleeting moment, the taste wasn't entirely unpleasant. The whispers continued, weaving a tapestry of speculation and condemnation. Each word was a thread, tightening the noose around Wei Ming's neck. Zhangyi listened, her mind racing, piecing together the fragmented information. A risky investment, a miscalculation, a betrayal of trust. It was a familiar story, one she'd seen play out countless times in the cutthroat world of corporate ambition. Only this time, it was personal. A wave of exhaustion washed over her, a bone-deep weariness that seeped into her very core. The office, with its sterile hum and suffocating air, suddenly felt claustrophobic. She needed air, needed to escape the suffocating weight of the whispers, the simmering resentment, the cold, hard knot of determination that was slowly taking root in her heart. She stood, her legs trembling slightly, and walked towards the window. The city sprawled beneath her, a concrete jungle shimmering under the pale morning light. She looked out at the endless expanse of buildings, each one a testament to human ambition, to the relentless pursuit of success, no matter the cost. And in that moment, she knew. She wouldn't be a victim. She wouldn't be crushed beneath the weight of Wei Ming's machinations, or the indifference of a system that rewarded ruthlessness and punished vulnerability. She would fight. She would claw her way out of this suffocating mire, even if it meant embracing the darkness that was stirring within her. She would use Wei Ming's downfall as her stepping stone, a grim testament to her own resilience. The thought, once terrifying, now filled her with a strange sense of purpose, a chilling resolve that hardened her gaze and set her jaw. The game had changed. And she was ready to play. The air hung thick and heavy, the silence punctuated only by the hum of the air conditioning. Zhang Yi could feel the blood pulsing in her ears, a counterpoint to the insistent, rhythmic thrum of the fluorescent lights above. Wei Ming stood before her, his shadow stretching long and distorted across the polished floor. His face, normally smooth and impassive, was now etched with a chilling calm, a mask that Zhang Yi knew concealed something far more turbulent. He exhaled slowly, a deliberate release of breath that prickled the hairs on her arms. He's playing a game, she thought, her stomach clenching. A game of cat and mouse, and he thinks he's already won. You leaked the user data. His voice was low, devoid of its usual professional polish. It scraped against the silence, each word a carefully placed stone in the edifice of his accusation. Zhang Yi met his gaze, forcing her own expression to remain neutral, a blank slate against which his assumptions could shatter. Inside, a storm raged. Fear, yes, but also a surge of defiance. He wants a confession, a quick and easy victory. He won't get it. I don't know what you're talking about, she replied, her voice remarkably steady, even to her own ears. The lie tasted bitter, but necessary. Wei Ming smiled, a thin, cruel curve of his lips. Don't you? He countered, taking a step closer. The subtle shift in the power dynamic was palpable. Zhang Yi could smell the faint scent of his cologne, a sharp, masculine aroma that suddenly felt suffocating. He's trying to intimidate me. The realization sparked a flicker of anger within her, a small ember against the encroaching darkness of his accusation. No, she repeated, injecting a touch of steel into her voice. I haven't leaked anything. Each word was a carefully measured gamble, a push and pull against the invisible currents of power swirling between them. She could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes, a momentary crack in his facade of certainty. He doesn't have proof. The thought was a lifeline, a fragile thread of hope in the suffocating tension of the room. You've brought this on yourself, Zhang Yi, he said, his voice laced with a veiled threat. The ambiguity hung in the air, heavy and ominous. Zhang Yi's mind raced, trying to decipher his words, to anticipate his next move. What does he mean? What does he have planned? The questions clawed at her, sharp and insistent. He circled her slowly, like a predator sizing up its prey. Zhang Yi held her ground, refusing to cower, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her fear. She could feel the weight of his gaze, a physical pressure against her skin. It was a silent battle of wills, a clash of unspoken accusations and denials. I'll surely find evidence, he continued, his voice dripping with false sincerity. It's only a matter of time. He stopped directly behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. The proximity was unsettling, a calculated tactic designed to unsettle her. Jangi fought the urge to flinch, to recoil from his presence. She had to maintain control, to project an image of unwavering composure. He's bluffing, she told herself, clinging to the thought like a drowning woman to a piece of driftwood. He wants me to break, to confess. He wants to see me crumble. The realization hardened her resolve. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Then I suggest you start looking, she retorted, her voice laced with a touch of defiance. She turned to face him, her gaze steady and unwavering. The surprise flickered across his face, a fleeting expression that she quickly registered and filed away. He didn't expect that. The small victory, however insignificant, fueled her resolve. He studied her for a long moment, his eyes narrowed in assessment. The silence stretched, taut and brittle, filled with unspoken accusations and simmering resentment. Jangi could almost hear the gears turning in his mind, recalibrating his strategy. He's trying to figure out my next move, she realized. He's trying to understand why I'm not afraid. Finally, he broke the silence. We'll see, Jangi, he said, his voice laced with a chilling undercurrent of menace. We'll see. He turned and walked away, leaving Jangi standing alone in the suffocating silence of the room. The air, thick with tension only moments before, now felt strangely empty. The battle was far from over, she knew. This was just the beginning. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, steeling herself for the challenges that lay ahead. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was now mingled with a newfound determination. She wouldn't be broken. She wouldn't be defeated. She would fight. For her future, for her family, for herself. She had to. The neon glow of the city bled into the small, smoky restaurant, painting the steam rising from Jangi's teacup a hazy orange. She watched the condensation trace rivulets down the side of the cheap porcelain, each drop a mirror reflecting her own fractured reflection. He thought he could just discard her like a worn-out cog in his meticulously crafted machine. Transfer her, silence her, erase her contribution as if it were nothing more than a stray line of code. But Jangi wasn't code. She was flesh and blood, memory and ambition, and beneath the quiet surface of her demeanor, a storm was brewing. Across the table, Lin Wang's steady gaze met hers. The driver, a man she'd initially dismissed as just another face in the city's relentless churn, had surprised her. He possessed a quiet shrewdness, a calculating glint behind his seemingly ordinary exterior. He'd handled the scammer with a deftness that hinted at hidden depths. Perhaps, just perhaps, he could be the key. I hope you can help me, Jangi finally said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. The restaurant's clamor seemed to fade as she spoke, leaving only the humming silence between them. She could hear the erratic thump of her own heart, a frantic drumbeat against the cage of her ribs. What if he refused? What if he saw the desperation clinging to her like a second skin and recoiled? Lin Wang took a slow sip of his tea, his eyes never leaving hers. Jangi felt a prickle of unease. This man was a closed book, his thoughts concealed behind an impenetrable facade. Was he assessing her, weighing the risks, or simply indifferent to her plea? The silence stretched, each tick of the unseen clock a tiny hammer blow against her fragile composure. She could almost taste the metallic tang of fear on her tongue. He set the teacup down, the small click echoing in the sudden quiet. Tell me everything. His voice was low, devoid of inflection, yet somehow, it held a note of understanding. Or was she simply projecting her own desperate hopes onto his neutral demeanor? Jangi took a shaky breath, the knot in her stomach tightening. This was it. Her chance. She began to speak, her voice barely above a whisper, each word a carefully placed stone in the precarious edifice of her plan. She laid bare the intricate web of Wei Ming's manipulations, the subtle threats, the insidious erosion of her position within the company. She detailed the transfer, the blatant attempt to sideline her, to silence her voice. And then, the most difficult part, the tangled threads of their personal relationship, the promises whispered and then broken, the casual cruelty that had shattered her trust. With each revelation, Lin Wang's expression remained unchanged, a mask of impassivity. Yet, Zhang Yi felt a subtle shift in the air between them, a tightening of the invisible threads that bound them together in this shared moment of vulnerability. "I want the evidence," she finally said, her voice gaining strength. The words resonated with a new resolve, a flicker of the fire that Wei Ming had tried so hard to extinguish. "I want the evidencito, use it as a bargaining chip for the divorce." The silence returned, heavier this time, pregnant with unspoken implications. The clatter of dishes, the murmur of conversations, the hiss of the stove all seemed to recede into the background, leaving only the two of them suspended in this charged atmosphere. Lin Wang's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something calculation, perhaps, or even a hint of admiration crossing his face. He leaned back, the faintest of smiles playing on his lips. "Wei Ming is a careful man," he said, his voice a low rumble. "But no one is perfect. Everyone leaves a trail." Zhang Yi's heart leaped. Was he agreeing? Was this the beginning of her fight back? A wave of something akin to hope washed over her, a fragile blossom pushing through the cracked earth of her despair. She watched him, her gaze intent, searching his face for any sign of hesitation, any hint of doubt. "What do you want in return?" she asked, the question hanging in the air between them. There was no such thing as a free lunch, especially in this city, in this world. She knew that whatever Lin Wang offered, it would come at a price. He considered her for a long moment, his gaze piercing, dissecting her motives, her vulnerabilities. Zhang Yi held his gaze, refusing to flinch. She had nothing left to lose. "Information," he finally said, his voice soft yet firm. "I need information about the inner workings of the company." Zhang Yi felt a jolt of unease. What kind of information? What was he planning? But the flicker of hope refused to be extinguished. This was her chance, her only chance. She had to take it. "I can do that," she said, the words a quiet vow. A silent agreement settled between them, a fragile alliance forged in the heart of the city's neon-lit darkness. The clatter of the restaurant seemed to amplify, the world rushing back in to fill the void of their shared silence. Zhang Yi felt a strange sense of calm descend upon her, the eye of the storm. She had taken the first step. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger, but she would walk it. She had to. For herself, for her future, for the chance to finally break free from the suffocating grip of Wei Ming's control. And in the quiet strength of the driver beside her, she found a sliver of unexpected hope, a fragile thread of connection in the vast, indifferent tapestry of the city. The game had begun. The faint hum of the computer fan whirred in the otherwise silent office, a rhythmic pulse mirroring the frantic beat of Zhang Yi's heart. The glow of the monitor illuminated her face, casting harsh shadows that accentuated the lines of worry etched around her eyes. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, each keystroke a calculated risk in the high-stakes game she was playing. Wei Ming's computer, a fortress of secrets, lay vulnerable before her. She could almost taste the metallic tang of fear on her tongue. Was this a trap? Had he anticipated this move? The thought, a venomous serpent, coiled in her gut. But the lure of the truth, the promise of vindication, was too strong to resist. She inhaled sharply, a silent prayer escaping her lips. 0927, she whispered, the numbers a talisman against the rising tide of panic. Each digit pressed was an act of defiance, a rebellion against the injustice she had endured. The screen flickered, then refreshed. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. It worked, she breathed, the words barely audible above the hum of the machine. Relief washed over her, a wave of warmth chasing away the chill of fear. It was a fleeting moment of triumph, quickly replaced by the gnawing anxiety of the next step. The labyrinthine structure of Wei Ming's files was daunting, a complex web designed to protect his secrets. Each click of the mouse was a step into the unknown, a gamble in a game with potentially devastating consequences. Her eyes scanned the endless list of folders, searching for the needle in the haystack. The pressure, immense and suffocating, threatened to crush her. What if she couldn't find it? What if all this risk was for nothing? The thought, a dark cloud, threatened to eclipse the fragile hope that had bloomed within her. "I found it," she murmured, her voice tight with a mixture of triumph and apprehension. A folder, innocuously labeled "Project Updates," held the key to her freedom. Within its digital depths lay the evidence she needed, the proof of Wei Ming's treachery. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat urging her forward. Quickly download that screenshot record. The words, spoken more to herself than to the empty room, were a command, a desperate plea to fate. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, executing the commands with a practiced ease that belied the turmoil raging within her. Each file downloaded was a victory, a tangible piece of the puzzle that would expose Wei Ming's lies. The whirring of the hard drive was a soundtrack to her liberation, a rhythmic affirmation of her success. With every passing second, the weight on her chest lightened, replaced by a growing sense of empowerment. She had done it. Against all odds, she had infiltrated the fortress and claimed her prize. But even as the final file downloaded, a flicker of unease remained. This was just the beginning. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Wei Ming was a formidable opponent, a master manipulator who wouldn't surrender easily. She knew that this was just the first step on a long and treacherous path. The silence of the office, once a source of anxiety, now felt different. It was no longer the silence of fear, but the silence of anticipation. The silence before the storm. Zhang Yi leaned back in her chair, the tension slowly draining from her body. The evidence was secure, a weapon waiting to be unleashed. A small, almost imperceptible smile played on her lips. The game, she realized, had just begun. The hunter had become the hunted. And Zhang Yi, for the first time in a long time, felt a glimmer of hope. The weight of responsibility, however, pressed down on her. This act of defiance, this retrieval of stolen data, was a double-edged sword. It offered a path to justice, a chance to reclaim her career and expose the corruption that had plagued the company. Yet, it also plunged her deeper into the murky waters of corporate intrigue, a world of shadows and whispers where trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. The image of Lin Xuang, her sister, flashed before her eyes, a stark reminder of the financial burdens weighing down their family. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about securing a future for them, a future free from the constant worry and struggle that had become their reality. The thought of Gua, her niece, brought a fresh wave of determination. She had to succeed, not just for herself, but for them. The stakes were higher than ever before. The fluorescent lights of the office buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the empty desks. The air was thick with the stale scent of paper and toner, a stark contrast to the vibrant, bustling streets outside. Zhang Yi could almost hear the distant rumble of traffic, a reminder of the life that existed beyond these sterile walls, a life she desperately wanted to reclaim. The contrast between the cold, impersonal environment of the office and the warmth of her family's love was jarring, a constant reminder of what she was fighting for. Closing her eyes, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger. But the fear, once a paralyzing force, had now transformed into a source of strength. She knew that the road to redemption wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The image of Wei Ming, his smug face contorted in anger, flashed before her eyes. A flicker of satisfaction, sharp and cold, ran through her. He wouldn't get away with this. She wouldn't let him. This time, she would be the one in control. This time, she would dictate the terms. The air hung heavy, thick with unspoken words and the metallic tang of impending rain. Zhang Yi clutched the folder tighter, the edges digging into her palm, a small, physical anchor in the swirling sea of her anxiety. The restaurant was upscale, quiet, the kind of place Wei Ming frequented, all dark wood and hushed whispers, a stark contrast to the chaotic emotions churning within her. He was already there, seated at a corner table, a half-empty glass of amber liquid gleaming under the dim lights. He looked up as she approached, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. For a fleeting moment, Zhang Yi hesitated, a sudden, sharp pang of doubt, a whisper of what might have been. He had been her mentor, once. Someone she'd admired, even respected. But that respect had eroded, grain by grain, washed away by the tide of his manipulations and betrayals. Now, only the hard, cold sediment of resentment remained. He gestured to the chair opposite him. Zhang Yi, he greeted, his voice smooth, controlled, the same voice that had charmed her, lied to her, used her. She slid into the seat, the leather cool against her skin, a stark contrast to the burning tension in her chest. She placed the folder on the table between them, the sound echoing in the quiet space, a silent declaration of war. "You wanted to see me," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Inside, though, her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She forced herself to meet his gaze, refusing to flinch. He leaned back, swirling the liquid in his glass. "I received your message," he replied, his eyes, dark and unfathomable, fixed on the folder. "Bring the evidence." His tone was calm, almost indifferent, but Zhang Yi saw the subtle tightening of his jaw, the almost imperceptible tremor in his hand. He was nervous. And that, more than anything, fueled her resolve. She slid the folder towards him. "It's all there," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The evidence, meticulously gathered, painstakingly documented, represented months of clandestine work, a slow, burning fuse finally reaching its destination. He opened the folder, his movements deliberate, almost slow motion. Zhang Yi watched him, her breath catching in her throat. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, punctuated only by the rustle of paper and the distant clinking of cutlery. As he read, his face remained impassive, a carefully constructed mask. But Zhang Yi saw it, the subtle flicker of fear in his eyes, the slight paling of his skin. He closed the folder, the snap echoing in the quiet room. "I did it," he admitted, his voice low, devoid of its usual charm. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their implications. Zhang Yi's mind raced. This confession, this unexpected admission of guilt, felt wrong. Too easy. He looked up at her, his gaze intense, searching. "I wanted to gift you the position," he continued, his voice laced with a strange mix of sincerity and calculation. "You've done so much for me." Zhang Yi stared at him, her mind reeling. A gift? Was he serious? This wasn't remorse, this was manipulation, a desperate attempt to regain control. A wave of nausea washed over her. He hadn't changed. He was still the same manipulative, self-serving man who had used her, discarded her, and now, in a twisted turn of events, was trying to frame his betrayal as an act of generosity. "A gift?" she echoed, her voice laced with disbelief. The absurdity of his claim threatened to shatter the fragile composure she had so carefully maintained. He saw the doubt in her eyes, the unwavering skepticism that mirrored her own internal turmoil. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Misha, she wasn't right for it. You are. He reached across the table, his hand hovering over hers. Jangi recoiled, pulling her hand away as if his touch were fire. Her internal monologue raged. He was trying to rewrite history, to paint himself as the benevolent mentor, the one who had always had her best interests at heart. The audacity of it was breathtaking. He thought he could still control her, still manipulate her with his carefully crafted words and calculated gestures. Don't, she said, her voice low and steady, insult my intelligence. The air crackled with unspoken tension, the silence heavy with the weight of their shared history. He retracted his hand, his expression unreadable. You have the power now, Jangi, he said, his voice a low murmur. What are you going to do with it? The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken threats and promises. Jangi looked at him, her heart pounding against her ribs. She had won, hadn't she? She had the evidence, the power to expose him, to ruin him. But as she looked at him, sitting there, stripped of his usual arrogance, a strange sense of emptiness filled her. This victory felt hollow, devoid of the satisfaction she had anticipated. The restaurant's muted lighting cast long shadows across the table, blurring the lines between victor and vanquished. The scent of expensive wine and something subtly floral hung in the air, a stark contrast to the bitter taste of betrayal that lingered on Jangi's tongue. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, tapping against the window panes like a hesitant applause. Jangi took a deep breath, the cool air a welcome balm against the burning tension in her chest. She had the power now. But the question remained, what would she do with it? The future stretched before her, a vast, uncertain landscape shrouded in the mist of possibilities. And for the first time in a long time, Jangi felt a flicker of hope, a fragile ember glowing in the darkness. The future was undetermined, and in that uncertainty, she found a strange sense of liberation. The click of the lock echoed in the small, dimly lit hallway. Jangi pushed the door open, the familiar scent of stir-fried garlic and chili oil momentarily eclipsing the bitter taste of the afternoon's confrontation. The small apartment, crammed with mismatched furniture and the ghosts of childhood memories, felt both suffocating and strangely comforting. Sis, I'm coming in. Did you and Lin Wang make up? She called out, her voice softer than the steel she'd worn just moments ago in Wei Ming's office. He'd looked at her, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Was it surprise? Regret? Or just the cold calculation she'd come to expect? She pushed the thought away, the weight of it settling heavy in her chest. Here, in this cramped space, at least she could pretend to shed the armor she wore in the outside world. A clatter from the kitchen followed by the squeak of a chair. Lin Shuang emerged, wiping her hands on her apron, a tired smile etched on her face. You're back early. Was already asleep. Her gaze lingered on Jangi's face, searching. How did it go? The unspoken question hung in the air, thick with shared anxieties. Jangi forced a smile, a pale imitation of genuine cheer. Fine, everything's fine. She knew Lin Shuang wouldn't be fooled. Their bond, forged in shared struggles and whispered confidences, ran deeper than surface pleasantries. Lin Wang shuffled in from the balcony, a cigarette dangling from his lips. He stubbed it out in a chipped ashtray, the acrid smell mixing with the lingering aroma of dinner. So, the prodigal sister returns, he said, a hint of teasing in his voice. Jangi met his gaze, a flicker of warmth chasing away some of the chill that had settled in her bones. Don't start, Lin Wang. Just tell me you two aren't fighting anymore. We're not fighting, Lin Shuang said quickly, a touch too quickly. Jangi saw the tension in her shoulders, the slight tightening of her jaw. The fight, whatever its source, hadn't truly dissipated, merely simmered beneath the surface. "It's just money's tight, you know." Lin Xuan's voice trailed off, the weight of unspoken worries pressing down on her. Jiang Yi knew. She felt the same pressure, a constant, dull ache in her gut. The weight of responsibility for her sister and niece, the fear of failing them, was a burden she carried every waking moment. Later, after a silent dinner punctuated only by the clinking of chopsticks and Guo's soft snores from the bedroom, Jiang Yi found herself on the small balcony, the city lights blurring into a hazy glow. The night air, thick with the scent of exhaust fumes and distant cooking, did little to clear the tightness in her chest. She thought of Wei Ming, his smooth words and veiled threats, the way he held power over her future. A wave of anger washed over her, hot and bitter. She wanted to fight, to claw her way out of the corner he'd pushed her into. But the thought of her sister, of Guo, of the precarious balance of their lives, held her back. She couldn't afford to be reckless. Not anymore. Back inside, Lin Xuan was washing dishes, the rhythmic clinking a soothing counterpoint to the turbulent thoughts swirling in Jiang Yi's head. "Lin Wang told me about the uncle," Jiang Yi said quietly, the words heavy on her tongue. Lin Wang had recounted the afternoon's events, his voice laced with a mixture of anger and incredulity. The uncle, a distant relative they barely knew, had shown up at their doorstep, spinning a sob story about a sick child and mounting debts. Lin Wang, initially sympathetic, had quickly seen through the fabricated tale, the carefully crafted details that masked the blatant manipulation. He'd confronted the uncle, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the simmering anger beneath the surface. The uncle had left empty-handed, his face a mask of thwarted greed. "He's gone," Lin Xuan said, her voice tight. Lin Wang took care of it. There was a tremor in her voice that betrayed the fear that had gripped her. The fear of being vulnerable, of being taken advantage of the world's constant barrage of threats against their fragile stability. Jiang Yi wrapped her arms around her sister, feeling the thinness of her frame, the exhaustion that seeped from her pores. "We'll be okay," she whispered, the words as much a reassurance to herself as to Lin Xuan. Later, lying awake in the cramped room she shared with Guo, Jiang Yi listened to the rhythmic breathing of her niece. The small, steady breaths were a reminder of the life she was fighting for, the future she was determined to secure. She thought of Misha, her colleague, the effortless way she navigated the corporate landscape, the promotion she'd received that Jiang Yi had coveted. A pang of envy, sharp and insistent, pierced through her. But it was quickly followed by a surge of resolve. She wouldn't be broken. She wouldn't let Wei Ming, or the circumstances of her life, dictate her fate. She would find a way, a path forward, not just for herself, but for the family she loved. The city lights, filtering through the thin curtains, cast long shadows on the wall, a silent testament to the long night ahead. But in the darkness, Jiang Yi found a flicker of hope, a small, persistent flame that refused to be extinguished. The hum of the air conditioner was a constant, almost a physical presence in the pristine office. Lin Wang sat across from the HR representative, a young woman whose smile felt manufactured, like a product off the assembly line. The offer letter sat on the table, a crisp white rectangle that held the weight of a potential future. A future she hadn't dared to imagine just a few months ago. "This is a fantastic opportunity, Ms. Lin," the woman said, her voice bright and professional. "We're very impressed with your qualifications." Lin Wang felt a flicker of something cold in her stomach, a familiar unease. Impressed? With what qualifications? The ones from a life that no longer existed, a life she had painstakingly constructed, brick by brick, only to see it crumble into dust. "Thank you," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. The words echoed the hollow politeness she had perfected over the years, a shield against the vulnerability churning within. "They don't know the real me," she thought, her fingers tracing the edge of the offer letter. They see a fabricated past, a ghost of who I used to be. Her mind drifted to the factory floor, the deafening roar of machinery, the acrid smell of chemicals clinging to her clothes, the exhaustion seeping into her bones at the end of each grueling shift. That life, that real life, felt like a distant dream now, separated from her present by an unbridgeable chasm. This sleek office, with its panoramic city views and the hushed murmur of professional conversations, felt like a costume she was trying on, unsure if it would ever truly fit. "You've been out of this industry for too long," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. The HR representative's smile faltered slightly. "Yes, we understand there's been a gap in your employment history, but your previous experience at..." Lin Wang barely registered the rest of the sentence. A vicious cycle, that's what it was. She had clawed her way out of one life only to find herself at the precipice of another, equally precarious. The company, the industry, the whole system, it was designed to chew you up and spit you out, leaving you scrambling for scraps. "I can't be fit for the job," she thought, a bitter taste rising in her throat. "Not anymore. I'm tainted." The scam, the desperation, the choices she'd made, they clung to her like shadows, whispering reminders of her failures. The HR representative continued to extol the virtues of the company, the benefits, the growth potential. Lin Wang nodded, her expression carefully neutral. She had learned to be a chameleon, adapting to her surroundings, mirroring the expectations of others. It was a survival tactic, a way to navigate the treacherous currents of the world. "We're particularly interested in your experience with logistics," the woman said, her voice regaining its enthusiastic lilt. "We believe you'd be a valuable asset to our team." The word asset felt jarring, reducing her to a commodity, a cog in the machine. Was that all she was? A tool to be used, a resource to be exploited? Lin Wang thought of Jiangyi, her sister, struggling under the weight of her own burdens. The weight of their mother's expectations, the weight of providing for her daughter Gua, the weight of a life that seemed determined to crush her spirit. She saw a reflection of herself in Jiangyi's struggles, a shared sense of desperation, a shared yearning for something more. The image of Gua's small face, her innocent eyes filled with an unspoken worry, flashed through Lin Wang's mind. "I have to do this," she thought, her resolve hardening. "For Jiangyi, for Gua, for myself." Later that day, Lin Wang found herself standing outside the towering glass building of Jiangyi's company. The setting sun cast long shadows, painting the cityscape in hues of orange and purple. The air was thick with the smell of exhaust fumes and the faint scent of street food from a nearby vendor. She watched the stream of employees pouring out of the building, their faces etched with fatigue, their steps hurried and purposeful. Jiangyi emerged from the crowd, her shoulders slumped, her gaze fixed on the pavement. Lin Wang's heart ached at the sight of her sister's weariness. "Jiangyi," she called out, her voice cutting through the din of the city. Jiangyi looked up, her eyes widening in surprise. "Lin Wang. What are you doing here?" "I wanted to see you," Lin Wang said, approaching her sister. "How are things?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken anxieties. Jiangyi sighed, her shoulders slumping further. "The same," she muttered. "Wei Ming is still making my life hell." The bitterness in her voice was palpable. Lin Wang reached out and squeezed Jiangyi's hand. "It won't always be like this," she said, her voice filled with a quiet conviction. "Things will change." Jiangyi looked at her, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Lin Wang knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The ghosts of her past still lingered, and the challenges of the future loomed large. But she had something now, a sense of purpose, a reason to fight. And that, she realized, was more valuable than any job offer, any corporate ladder, any illusion of success. It was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter she would write on her own terms. The chipped porcelain mug warmed Lin Wang's hands, the cheap tea inside doing little to soothe the gnawing anxiety that had taken root in her stomach. Across the small, cluttered table, her sister, Lin Xuan, stared blankly at the peeling floral wallpaper, her face etched with a weariness that went beyond the physical. Lin Wang watched her, the familiar pang of helplessness tightening her chest. Xuan always had been the delicate one, easily bruised by life's sharp edges. Lin Wang, on the other hand, had learned to harden herself, to meet the world head-on. The scam, the near miss with losing their meager savings, it had only reinforced the belief that she was the only one who could truly protect her family. She glanced at the flickering fluorescent light overhead, its sickly glow casting long shadows across the room. Just like life, she thought grimly, full of flickering promises that often fade to darkness. Zhang Yi entered the room, her presence a sudden shift in the stagnant air. The tension that clung to her like a second skin was palpable. Lin Wang saw the subtle tremor in her hands as she reached for a glass of water, the slight downturn of her lips as she met Xuan's gaze. Zhang Yi had always been the ambitious one, driven by a fierce desire to escape the confines of their shared past. Lin Wang understood that drive, that yearning for something more. But she also saw the toll it was taking on her, the way it was slowly eroding the warmth that had once shone in her eyes. Misha got the promotion, Zhang Yi finally said, her voice flat, devoid of any emotion. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken resentment. Lin Wang knew how much that promotion had meant to Zhang Yi, how she'd poured every ounce of her energy into proving herself worthy. Wei Ming, the name surfaced in Lin Wang's mind, a bitter taste on her tongue. She knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that he was behind this. His manipulative tactics, his subtle undermining of Zhang Yi's efforts, it was a pattern Lin Wang had witnessed before, a cruel game he played with disturbing relish. Lin Xuan sighed, a sound laden with exhaustion. Blood ties, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. The words seemed to drift, disconnected from the present, lost in the labyrinth of her own worries. Lin Wang knew what she meant. The unspoken weight of family, the obligation to provide, the constant fear of failing those who depended on you. It was a burden they all shared, each carrying it in their own way. Sometimes a child is like a light, Lin Xuan continued, her gaze drifting towards the window, as if searching for something beyond the grimy cityscape. Lin Wang followed her gaze, her thoughts turning to Guo, Xuan's daughter. The little girl, with her bright eyes and infectious laughter, was the one flicker of hope in their otherwise bleak existence. For Xuan, Guo was everything. A reason to keep fighting, a reason to endure the endless struggles. Zhang Yi remained silent, her face a mask of carefully controlled emotions. Lin Wang saw the flicker of pain in her eyes, the subtle clenching of her jaw. She knew that Zhang Yi's ambition, her relentless pursuit of success, was driven by the same desire that fueled Xuan's quiet resilience, the need to provide, to secure a better future for the ones they loved. But Zhang Yi's path was different, fraught with its own dangers and compromises. Lin Wang worried about her, about the choices she was making, the price she might ultimately have to pay. I need to quickly find a job, Zhang Yi finally said, her voice regaining some of its usual steel. The words were a declaration, a reaffirmation of her resolve. Lin Wang watched her, a mixture of admiration and concern swirling within her. Zhang Yi's determination was both her strength and her weakness. It could propel her to great heights, but it could also blind her to the potential pitfalls that lay ahead. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months. Lin Wang found a stable job, the monotony of the work a welcome contrast to the constant uncertainty that had plagued her life. She saw the subtle shift in Xuan's demeanor, the gradual easing of the lines of worry etched on her face. Guo's laughter filled their small apartment, a vibrant melody that chased away the shadows. Lin Wang watched them, a quiet sense of contentment settling in her heart. She had built a small haven, a place of refuge from the storms that raged outside. Zhangyi's journey was different, a winding road filled with both triumphs and setbacks. She navigated the treacherous currents of the corporate world, her sharp intelligence and unwavering determination her only weapons. Lin Wang watched from a distance, her heart a mixture of pride and apprehension. She saw the toll it was taking on Zhangyi, the way the constant pressure was slowly hardening her, chipping away at the warmth that had once defined her. Yet, beneath the surface, Lin Wang also sensed a steely resilience, a refusal to be broken. Zhangyi was a survivor, forged in the fires of adversity. She would find her own way, her own path to the future she envisioned. One evening, as the city lights twinkled outside their window, Lin Wang sat with Shuang, sipping tea and listening to Guo's cheerful chatter. The air was filled with a quiet sense of peace, a fragile tranquility that Lin Wang cherished. She thought of Zhangyi, out there in the sprawling metropolis, fighting her own battles. A sudden image flashed in Lin Wang's mind, Zhangyi, standing tall, her eyes filled with a quiet strength, a faint smile playing on her lips. The image brought a sense of hope, a flicker of warmth that spread through Lin Wang's chest. The future was uncertain, the path ahead fraught with challenges. But they would face it, together, each in their own way. They were survivors, bound by the unbreakable threads of family, love, and shared dreams. And in that shared strength, Lin Wang found a quiet, unwavering optimism. The future, she knew, was not something to be feared, but something to be embraced, one step at a time. The cafe hummed with the low murmur of conversations, the clinking of porcelain against saucer a gentle counterpoint to the jazzy music drifting from unseen speakers. Zhangyi stirred her latte, the swirling foam mirroring the turmoil within her. She'd chosen this place deliberately, a quiet corner tucked away from the main thoroughfare, the large windows offering a panoramic view of the city, a city that had become both her battlefield and her prison. Each towering skyscraper seemed to mock her, symbols of the success that remained just out of reach. The transfer to the new department felt like a demotion disguised as an opportunity, a subtle push towards the periphery by Wei Ming. She knew his game. He wanted her gone, silenced. But she wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Not yet. A shadow fell across the table, and Zhangyi looked up. Mr. Zhao, his face a carefully neutral mask, pulled out the chair opposite her. His handshake was firm, his gaze direct, and for a fleeting moment, Zhangyi felt a flicker of hope. He wasn't like the others. There was a certain steeliness beneath his polite demeanor that resonated with her own resolve. Mr. Zhao, she began, her voice betraying none of the anxiety that gnawed at her insides. Thank you for agreeing to meet. He holds the key, she thought, the key to my future. Miss Zhangyi, he replied, his voice smooth as polished jade. I've heard a great deal about you. The air thickened with unspoken words, the weight of expectation pressing down on them. Zhangyi wondered what exactly he'd heard, whispers of her talent, or rumors of her clashes with Wei Ming. The uncertainty pricked at her, a sharp reminder of her vulnerability. Why did you ask me to meet here? She finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The question echoed not only in the small space between them but also within the vast chamber of her doubts. He took a sip of his tea, the silence stretching, each second amplifying her unease. Miss Zhangyi, he began, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. I believe we share a common goal. Her heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the cage of her ribs. A common goal. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. She'd researched him thoroughly, delving into his past, tracing the intricate web of his business dealings. He was a man who played the long game, a strategist who understood the value of patience and precision. "I need someone powerful by my side," she confessed, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. The raw honesty surprised even herself. For so long, she'd hidden her ambition behind a veil of compliance, playing the role of the dutiful employee. But now, the mask was off. There was no point in pretending. A faint smile played on Mr. Zhao's lips. He seemed to relish her candor, a glint of admiration in his eyes. "And I," he said, his voice low and steady, "need someone resourceful." The unspoken agreement hung between them, a tangible force that vibrated with the promise of power. Zhangyi's mind raced, calculating the risks, weighing the potential rewards. This was a gamble, a dangerous game with high stakes. But what choice did she have? Wei Ming had pushed her into a corner, leaving her with nothing to lose. Later, as she walked away from the cafe, the city lights blurring into a kaleidoscope of color, a sense of exhilaration coursed through her veins. The fear remained, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was overshadowed by a surge of adrenaline, a potent cocktail of anticipation and resolve. Mr. Zhao's proposal was audacious, bordering on reckless. But it was also brilliant. It offered her not just a lifeline, but a chance to rewrite the script, to seize control of her own narrative. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about revenge. She thought of Lin Xuan, her sister, burdened by debt and the relentless demands of their mother. The weight of her sister's struggles pressed down on her, a constant reminder of the precariousness of their lives. She thought of Lin Wang, her sister's husband, a man of quiet strength who navigated the complexities of their family with remarkable grace. He had deftly handled the scammer, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the uncle's frantic desperation. His resourcefulness, his ability to see through the deception, had left a lasting impression on Zhangyi. It was a reminder that even in the face of adversity, there was always a way to fight back. The news of Misha's promotion had stung, a sharp reminder of her own stalled career. But now, the sting had transformed into a burning ember, fueling her determination. She wouldn't let Wei Ming win. She wouldn't let him crush her dreams. She would rise, phoenix-like, from the ashes of his betrayal. Mr. Zhao had outlined his plan with meticulous detail, each step carefully orchestrated to maximize their chances of success. It was a high-wire act, fraught with danger, but the potential payoff was immense. He needed her expertise, her intimate knowledge of the company's inner workings, to execute his strategy. And she, in turn, needed his influence, his network of connections, to reach the heights she'd always dreamed of. It was a symbiotic relationship, built on a foundation of mutual ambition and a shared desire for retribution. The image of Wei Ming's smug face flashed before her eyes, the memory of his condescending remarks fueling her resolve. She would show him. She would prove him wrong. She would climb the corporate ladder, not by playing his games, but by forging her own path. And when she reached the top, when she finally held the reins of power, she would make him pay for everything he had done. The night air was cool against her skin, a welcome contrast to the simmering heat within her. The city lights twinkled like a million fallen stars, each one a tiny beacon of hope in the vast expanse of the night. Zhangyi took a deep breath, the crisp air filling her lungs, a sense of purpose settling over her. The road ahead would be long and arduous, filled with challenges and uncertainties. But she was ready. She had a plan, a powerful ally, and a burning desire to succeed. The game had changed, and she was finally holding all the cards. The chipped porcelain of the rice bowl warmed Lin Wang's hand, the familiar weight a small comfort in the chaotic symphony of dinner time. Gua, her daughter, sat perched on a stack of phone books, chopsticks held with the clumsy enthusiasm of a 5-year-old. Tiny grains of rice clung stubbornly to her cheek, a testament to her focused dedication to the meal. Lin Wang watched her, a quiet smile playing on her lips. The steam from the jasmine rice curled around Gua's face, softening the sharp angles of her childish features, and for a moment, the world outside their small kitchen ceased to exist. Just the rhythmic click of chopsticks, the soft hum of the refrigerator, and the contented sighs of a child happily fed. Lin Wang's heart ached with a tenderness so profound it felt like a physical pressure against her ribs. This, she thought, this is all that matters. This messy, mundane moment held more meaning than any corporate ladder Wei Ming could ever climb. "Mommy," Guo mumbled through a mouthful of rice, "will you play dolls with me after dinner?" Lin Wang chuckled, reaching across the table to wipe the stray grain from Guo's cheek. "Of course, little sparrow. What kind of game shall we play today?" Guo's eyes widened, sparkling with an innocent delight that Lin Wang knew wouldn't last forever. "The princess and the dragon. But I want to be the dragon this time." "A fearsome dragon, I'm sure," Lin Wang teased, her voice laced with amusement. She knew that playing the dragon meant Guo would get to roar and stomp and generally cause delightful chaos. It was a small price to pay for the joy that radiated from her daughter. Inside, though, a different thought, a darker undercurrent, tugged at Lin Wang's composure. How much longer would she be able to share these moments? The thought was fleeting, a ghost of a worry, quickly pushed aside by the immediate demands of motherhood. Later, after the dishes were washed and the dolls were scattered across the worn rug, Lin Wang found herself staring out the window. The city lights glittered like fallen stars, a vast and impersonal expanse that stretched far beyond the confines of their small apartment. Guo was asleep on the floor, her small hand curled around a plush dragon, her breath soft and even. Lin Wang watched her, the tenderness in her chest mixing with a growing unease. She thought of Jiangyi, her sister, struggling under the weight of their mother's expectations and the constant pressure of their financial woes. She thought of Wei Ming, his ambition a corrosive force that seemed to poison everything it touched. And then she thought of the uncle, the scammer, whose desperation mirrored her own, though his methods were far less palatable. Each of them, in their own way, grappling with the same fundamental question, how to survive in a world that seemed determined to break them. "Only little kids need their moms," Guo had murmured sleepily earlier, nestled against Lin Wang's side. "Mommy is going to kindergarten too." The words echoed in Lin Wang's mind, a childish simplification of a complex reality. In a way, Guo was right. They were all navigating their own versions of kindergarten, learning the harsh lessons of adulthood, stumbling through the complexities of relationships, and trying to find their place in the larger world. Lin Wang's kindergarten, however, felt particularly precarious. She knew, with a chilling certainty, that the choices she was making, the risks she was taking, were leading her down a path with no easy return. The memory of the uncle's desperate plea, the fear in his eyes, the tremor in his voice as he spun his web of lies, clung to her like a second skin. She had seen a reflection of herself in his desperation, a glimpse of the lengths she might go to for her family. The line between right and wrong had blurred, the moral compass she'd always relied on spinning wildly. The weight of her decisions pressed down on her, heavy and suffocating. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, trying to find a center of calm amidst the storm raging within. What was she becoming? She knew, with an unsettling clarity, that her life was about to change irrevocably. The threads of fate, woven so intricately, were about to unravel, and she would be swept along in the current, powerless to resist. She looked again at Guo, her small form bathed in the soft glow of the streetlights. This, she thought fiercely, this is why. For Guo, she would face whatever came, navigate the treacherous currents, and fight for a future, even if that future meant sacrificing everything she held dear. The finality of it all, the point of no return, loomed before her, not as a terrifying abyss, but as a necessary leap of faith. There was no turning back. Her kindergarten had just begun. The air conditioning in the waiting room hummed a monotonous tune, a counterpoint to the erratic rhythm of Lin Xuang's heart. Her palms, despite being meticulously dried moments before, felt damp again. For years since she last sat in a stiff chair like this, resume clutched like a lifeline, the weight of expectation pressing down on her. For years spent navigating the labyrinth of motherhood, of stretched finances, of whispered anxieties in the dead of night. For years that had etched themselves onto her face, around her eyes, in the slight slump of her shoulders. She could feel the assessing gaze of the receptionist behind the sleek, modern desk, the kind that made her feel like a specimen under a microscope. Was it pity she saw? Or perhaps a hint of dismissal? Lin Xuang straightened her back, a small act of defiance against the creeping self-doubt. This was for Gua, her daughter, her reason for braving the scrutiny, the judgment, the potential for rejection. And, perhaps, she admitted to herself in the quietest corner of her mind, it was also for her. The sleek, chrome-plated door opened, a woman in a tailored suit emerged, her smile crisp and professional. Lin Xuang. Lin Xuang rose, her legs feeling strangely unsteady. She followed the woman down a hallway, each step echoing the uncertainty that gnawed at her insides. The office was bright, minimalist, intimidatingly modern. Two interviewers sat opposite a vacant chair, their expressions unreadable. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of the countless practice interviews she'd conducted with Jiangyi, her younger sister. Jiangyi always so confident, so driven. A pang of guilt twisted in Lin Xuang's stomach. Jiangyi's struggles, her recent transfer, weighed heavily on her. This job, this opportunity, wasn't just for her and Gua, it was a chance to alleviate some of the burden on her sister, to offer a sliver of stability in their precarious lives. Tell us about your previous experience, the woman on the left began, her voice smooth, devoid of inflection. Lin Xuang's mind raced back, sifting through memories of a life that felt both distant and intimately familiar. She spoke, her voice a little shaky at first, then gaining strength as she delved into the specifics of her past roles, her accomplishments, the challenges she'd overcome. She could feel the interviewer's gaze, sharp and dissecting, probing for weaknesses, for gaps in her narrative. The 4-year void loomed large, an unspoken question hanging in the air. You took a 4-year career break, the man on the right finally stated, his tone neutral, yet laced with an undercurrent that Lin Xuang couldn't quite decipher. She braced herself, the practiced answer poised on her lips. Yes, she acknowledged, her voice steady. I became a mother, and my focus shifted to raising my daughter. She paused, a flicker of defiance entering her eyes. It was the most challenging and rewarding role I've ever undertaken. The woman on the left raised an eyebrow. And how do you plan to transition back into the workforce after such a significant gap? The question, though politely phrased, felt like a thinly veiled accusation. Lin Xuang's fingers tightened around her resume. This was the moment. The hurdle she had to clear. She met the woman's gaze directly, her voice unwavering. It's for my daughter, she began, the words resonating with a depth of emotion that surprised even herself. And also for myself. She took a breath, gathering her thoughts, pushing aside the years of self-doubt, the whispers of inadequacy that had plagued her. I want to set an example for my daughter, she continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. To show her that women can be both dedicated mothers and successful professionals. And I also want to reclaim a part of myself that I put aside, not out of regret, but out of necessity. A 4-year professional gap isn't something you can simply make up for, she admitted, a flicker of vulnerability crossing her face, quickly replaced by a resolute expression. But it doesn't erase the skills and experience I gained before. It's added to them. It's given me a different perspective, a deeper understanding of resilience, of time management, of problem solving. These are valuable assets in any role. The silence that followed felt heavy, pregnant with unspoken judgments. Lin Xuang held her breath, her heart pounding against her ribs. The woman on the left exchanged a look with her colleague, a subtle shift in their expressions that Lin Xuang couldn't quite interpret. Hope, fragile and tentative, began to bloom in her chest.